Okay, this is the Commercial Fisheries 2 video. Last video we considered tuna and some of the techniques and methods used to catch tuna, fast swimming pelagic fish. Now we're going to talk about snapper. Okay, snapper are a different sort of fish, and they have different characteristics to tuna, and so we use different methods. Okay, they're demersal, which means close to the bottom. Okay, they're associated with the bottom, not stuck right on it, and we'll have a look at what that means with a illustration a little bit later. They tend to be inshore, so you won't find them in 4,000 meters depth swimming around on the surface 400 miles offshore. Okay, moderate swimming speed. They're slower than a tuna, faster than a triple fin, faster than a flounder, so they're not going to be able to outrun a lot of the gear that a kahawai or perhaps a tuna could. Widespread. Okay, again, they're sort of, you don't find them only confined to one small area of the coast or of the margin of the near shore or just around foul ground. You'll find them all over the place, widespread around the sand. Loosely schooling, not as tight as shoals of kahawai and the like, but they do associate together, and usually less than 100 meters depth. Okay, so what sort of gear can we use to catch fish of this that have these characteristics? Another one might be gurnard or tarakihi. So these other types of fish that hapaka would be similar. Okay, these things would have these characteristics. We need to know what kind of gear to use. Okay. So perhaps we might use a bottom long line, and many of you have probably seen or deployed long lines from the beach or from a boat, and so you'll know exactly how this works. And what happens is you put out a buoy, and the buoy will run down to an anchor. So the buoy stays in one place, and then you just pay out a line, and every once in a while put more buoys on it, and anchor it at the other end. And weights, you'll have weights so that it stays along the bottom, and you'll have little, you have smaller sort of traces, and the weights the hooks and baits sit on the bottom, and the fish will come along and hopefully take those baits, get hooked, and then later on you come back to where you started or to the other end after you've let it sit for a while, and just bring that long line up. Okay, very similar to a surface long line, just weighted to the bottom. Okay, and then we have the Otter Trawl. Okay, now this is probably the method which catches more tonnage of fish than probably any other method. Per Seining to be close, but this probably catches more tonnage of fish than any other method of extracting wild marine resources from the ocean. And what we see here is a net that's much like a big sock. Okay, it is round. Okay, a round funnel, and it's got a bigger opening and a smaller end. This is called the cod end. Okay, and what you have is a ground rope, or another word for it is a bottom line. And then you have a top rope that's got weights on it, so it drags down along the bottom. And then you have a top line, float line, or a header line. It's got floats along it, and that keeps the net open at the top. It floats the top bit of the net up. Bottom end is kept down. And then you have these doors, which are very similar. They use the pressure of the water, as if you can imagine when you go down the road and you stick your hand out the window and you make a flat plane and you tilt it up, and the pushes your arm up, planes it up, or alternatively you push it, you tilt it down, and your arm gets planed down. Then they use these by hooking the this wire, this thing called a warp, to the inner part of that to that door. Then that will be drawn outwards, and it spreads the net out. So you can have quite a wide spread. You could have a spread that might be 100 meters wide behind a boat that's only 10 meters wide, or even 5 or 8 meters wide. Okay, so it tends to, they pull these along, and fish that are near the bottom, when that chain comes up, will jump up and be kept from swimming over the net, because this header line is in front of the down line, the ground line, the weighted line, and so they will tend to swim along in front of the net until they get tired, and then go to the back, which is called the cod end, and then eventually it's pulled up onto the boat. And you should go to the library and check out the video called A Closer Look at Trawling. Okay. So snapper are generally caught with long lines or trawls, bottom long lines or trawls. Okay. And there it is, a closer look at trawling. Alright, what about squid? Okay. These things are pelagic. Okay, inshore, offshore, moderate swimming speed, widespread, loosely schooling, usually less than 100 meters depth at night, deep during the day. So how are we going to catch squid with these, or fish with these characteristics? Okay, one way we can catch pelagic schooling fish that are moderate swimming speed is you can use midwater trawling, which was almost exactly the same as bottom trawling, except it's done. Tends to be a larger net, and it's done without touching the bottom of the ocean. So it's just trawled through the middle of the ocean. Schools of fish like southern blue whiting, sometimes hoki. Hoki are also caught with bottom trawls. Hoki are when they're schooling up off of the bottom a little bit, they'll use these midwater trawls, and these things can be massive, on the order of a couple of hundred, 150 meters, 200 meters wide. Okay, so if you were in the water and you were looking at a midwater trawl coming straight at you, this is what you'd see. You'd be looking down into the funnel of the net. Okay. Another way to catch squid is by squid jigging. Okay, so you have lines that go up and down. A few of you will probably have used squid jigs or seen squid jigs if you're regular fishing people. And so you just put them over the side, and they go up and down, and they rely on movement to fool the squid into thinking that that it is a bit of prey. Now this is done at night. You can't jig for squid during the day. There's no point, because the squid tend to go down deep or hide. But at night, if you shine huge lights on the surface of the water, it's very interesting being at sea a long way out at night and watching what swims by in the lights. You'll see huge amounts of larger plankton that you tend not to see during the day. But all of this stuff comes up. It's attracted by the light. There'll be these things will use that light as a way to allow them to help them prey on other smaller organisms in the water, and so you get a collection of these of organisms, of animals swimming around in the light at night. And so they take advantage of this by flashing huge lights down. Those other animals come around, the squid come around, they see these jigs and then jump on them. And you can see some very interesting videos. If you follow these two YouTube videos links, you can see some very interesting videos on squid jigging and seeing some of the squid come up on the line. Okay, butterfish. All right. Now these have different characteristics as well. So a long line put across reefs where these butterfish live would just get snagged, and you'd have a hard time being able to pull your long line up if you were trying to catch butterfish. Besides that, they're vegetarians, so they're not going to be taking your bait, and trawling through these areas, it's just not going to work. The trawl will get stuck on the rocks, and it's going to be very hard to catch the butterfish. The characteristics: inshore, solitary, and always reef associated. Okay, demersal again. Moderate swimming speed. If anybody has tried to spearfish these, you'll know how quickly they can move at times, but tend not to be long distance athletes, but rather quick burst swimmers. Widespread and usually less than 30 meters depth. There's a big fishery for butterfish in the South Island. So how are we going to go about catching a fish like this, where there's a high chance of entanglement of gear with the reef association? You can do something like this one here. The gill nets are the preferred method. Okay, a lot of bycatch, and they've been banned in certain areas around New Zealand because of the bycatch of Hector's and Maui's dolphin. But what these things do is set a curtain up, and if a fish swims into it and the netting is the right size, then the fish's head will go through, but not the body, and so they'll be stuck. And most fish can't back up unless they're ballistiform swimmers, as you've learned in marine mammals, birds, and fish. So their gills, and even if they can back up, their gills will get entangled in the netting, and that's why they're called gill nets. Okay, so they generally secured to, if it's a bottom gill net, it'll be secured to the seabed with an anchor, and then a float will come to the surface so you know where it is, and that curtain will hang along the bottom to the next floating point, or the next floating buoy and the next anchor. And these are usually left overnight and then picked up in the morning, because they can be visual barriers, which fish tend not to swim into during the day a lot of the time. Often used for flounder. Some of you would have used these for flounder. Midwater, they could be suspended, so you just put the required amount of rope from your buoy, and probably quite a few buoys off of the top, or drift net. They can be extended at the surface. And so many dolphins and sharks, large predators, were killed in the tuna drift net fishery. There used to be enough drift nets extended every night to encircle the earth a couple of times, but there was so much bycatch that they've been largely taken out of use. Okay. So what about piper garfish? Okay, so here we go. We have an inshore fish, tightly schooling, pelagic, reef associated, moderate swimming speed, widespread, sometimes tightly schooling, but often spread out, especially at night, but in the same general areas, and usually less than 20 meters depth. So some of you would have done beach seining for pipers or other bait fish, and it's a simple, it's very similar to the trawl net, but so what will happen is the boat will go along, leave one end of the rope on shore here, go out, cast the net off of the back of the boat, and then circle back around, bringing the other towing rope into another group. Or this can be done mechanically, or it can be done by people. And so these ropes are called warps. People just pull them in. I've seen it done with trucks. Maori, pre-Captain Cook, had nets that were as long as 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers long, of beach seines like this that would take more than 1,000 people to deploy and pull in. Okay, and so whatever fish are in this area will tend to get caught in this area, are caught in this net, funneled back, and then the whole thing is just brought onto shore. Here's a nice picture of beach seining. So any fish that happen to be in this area will be captured in this video, or in this method. And you can look at the video link below that's listed to see beach seining in action on YouTube. Okay, so crayfish, rock lobster. Characteristics for these things: inshore, demersal, reef associated, slow crawling, widespread, usually 0 to 100 meters depth, so usually fairly shallow. And the things like the nets that we saw with the butterfish would probably not work. These things just aren't moving around as quickly or quickly enough to be able to be caught by those nets. So these things like to scavenge on carrion, and we'll take advantage of that by using pots, baited pots. So these things work for lots of different crustaceans. Some fish, you put a bait in, the crayfish will climb into the net or into the pot, go through a funneled entrance, and then have a very hard time finding their way back out through that funneled entrance. Now you can see right here, this is a little escape hatch, so small crayfish can just walk right back out. Larger fish are retained. Okay. So here we go. Let's have a look at the zones that I've alluded to before. So your pelagic fish would be living up in the water column. Demersal fish are ones that are associated with the bottom but not necessarily stuck to it, like snapper. And then benthic things would be things like sponges that are stuck to the bottom, or perhaps whelks, octopus, flounder. They can swim, but they're often, most often will be found resting or lying on the bottom. Okay, we're going to leave it at that, and pick up with a few other New Zealand stocks and other fishing methods when we come back in the video number 3.